Pygmy Corydoras are the cutest cory catfish ever, but are they worth all the hype? I mean, I don't know about you, but I've only got room for a couple of tanks. So let's talk about what it takes to care for them, how hard it is to breed them, and whether or not I think they're a must-have fish. Hi, I'm Irene with girltalksfish, here with practical tips for busy fish keepers like you. And if you were following the saga of my worst experience with wild caught fish, then you know that I initially had some problems keeping these things alive. So let's first talk about their care requirements. Pygmy corys are one of the smallest cory catfish there are, so they only get to like a little bit larger than an inch, and therefore you could theoretically keep a small group of them in maybe a 5-gallon aquarium like this one, but since I was trying to breed them, I had a 10-gallon aquarium, and I ended up with 9 at first for a species-only setup, meaning that was the only type of fish in there. I even took out the amano shrimp because I was afraid they might eat the eggs if there were any. They are a schooling fish, meaning they like to be in a group of a lot of their own kind, and they like to swim mid-water. They kind of hover around like miniature hummingbirds, which is really cool. However, they can be a little bit shy. So if you have that problem, what I did in my case was I ended up getting 4 more pygmy corys that I found at a local fish store. So again, the more the merrier, the more they're more likely to come out, as well as add as much cover as possible. So in my case, I had this beautiful 10-gallon aquascape that I planned out, and I just let it kind of grow into a wild jungle, and they seemed a lot happier from it. So if you want to see a list of all the plants and equipment I used, you can see the video over here. Based on Rachel O'Leary's 101 Best Freshwater Nanospecies book, she recommended keeping them 72 to 79 degrees Fahrenheit, so I kind of set my temperature controller to 74 to 78. Now, where I ran into some trouble initially would be their water chemistry parameters. So they do come from South America's Amazon River Basin, which is known for having acidic, soft water. So you can imagine if you take a wild-caught pygmy cory that's used to 6.4 pH, and then you plop it into 8.0 tap water like I did, they're not gonna do so well. So my recommendation would be to definitely talk to your local fish store or to whatever breeder that you are getting them from, and just ask them, like, what is the pH? What are the water parameters you keep them at? How long have they been living in these water parameters, and are they doing well? And then you'll have a lot more success. So in my case, I ended up getting mine from an online breeder in Maryland, Aquatic Life Farm, and their conditions are pretty similar to mine, so they ended up doing awesome. Now that I had my happy and healthy herd of pygmy corys, time to condition them for breeding. So something I didn't realize, which I should have known, but they have annoyingly small mouths. Like, they can't even eat frozen bloodworms or even frozen mini bloodworms very well. Like, they'll kind of suck the juice out, but very slowly, not comfortably. Also, while you may see your pygmy corys like dart up to the surface to get a gulp of air, they don't tend to feed from the surface of the water. So really you're aiming for something that's really tiny and is a sinking food. So after a lot of experimentation, I finally have my list of their favorite foods, which includes Repashy gel food is definitely one of my favorites, just because it holds firm in the water and it sinks to the bottom, and they can kind of graze on it all day long. They of course love live baby brine shrimp, frozen Daphnia and frozen cyclops are good, as well as nano pellets, like the really smaller ones that are nearly like powder. Isaac from the Aquarium Co-Op forum told me that he conditioned his using frozen tube FX worms and extreme sinking wafers, so I'm definitely gonna have to try that next time. So now let's talk about breeding, and just to be upfront, I am not an expert. I actually only kept the pygmy corys in their breeding setup for about 7 months before I ended up moving them to my community tank. So this is kind of a description of my first attempts. I tried to induce breeding by doing things like, large cooler water changes to simulate kind of the rainy seasonal changes, but since it was kind of winter time, the temperatures in my tank were pretty low already, around 74 degrees Fahrenheit. So that didn't work. I also tried to kind of naturally lower my pH by adding some catappa leaves every once in a while, as well as doing minimal water changes, but my pH apparently stayed around 8.0 to 8.2 anyways when my pygmy fry were born. They basically did nothing for about 4 months, and then all of a sudden November, boom, there were eggs everywhere. Like, I never saw them breeding, but I knew that they were ready because there's this at least 1 or 2 really large female corys full of eggs, and then this swarm of males constantly hovering around her. As for where the eggs were laid, I only got a few on the glass, and for the most part, I found them kind of one-offs here and there, like there'd be like one on a dwarf Sagittaria leaf or one caught in the roots of the water sprite. I tried to rescue a few of the eggs and raise them in a specimen container. So I basically rolled them off with my finger, or I used a turkey baster to suck them up. And then I added a few drops of methylene blue, which was really successful at not allowing, I had a really high hatch rate. They didn't fungus up. So originally, when they are first laid, the eggs kind of look like a translucent white. And then gradually as they mature, they'll become kind of a translucent yellow tan. But if you see any solid white eggs, most likely those are unfertilized duds that you should remove quickly so they won't fungus up the other eggs. Unfortunately, while I was good at hatching the eggs, most of the fry ended up passing away in the specimen container. And I think it was because I just wasn't able to do as many manual small water changes as they needed. Like, I did one every single day, but that just still wasn't enough to keep the water pristine. So next time around, if I choose to raise the eggs myself, I would probably need something like an automatic water change fry rack, kind of like what Master Breeder Dean has. The most successful method for me, honestly, was colony breeding, where you just let the adults do their thing, lay the eggs in the main tank, and then let the fry hatch out with the adults. And the reason why I felt comfortable trying that is because I had heard that that pygmy corys probably won't eat their own young, and I found that to be pretty true. Like, the adults would be just kind of digging around the ground looking for food, and if there was a fry in the way, it would just dart off, and the adult wouldn't try to chase it, which was pretty cool. Another thing I did was minimal water changes, like definitely no gravel vacuuming, so that I could let the mulm, or that layer of brown fluffy dirt, kind of grow and build up, because there's a lot of good microflora in there for the young fry to eat. I definitely did notice that the fry would, like the adults, dart up to the surface to get a gulp of air, and then they would be so tired afterwards, they would kind of float down and not move, and I would think they were dead. So maybe something I would try next time would be to lower the water level so they don't have as far to swim. It's a pretty cool transformation because the babies, when they're born, start off with 2 black eyes and this big black band behind their head. And then with a couple of days, they look like they have 4 spots or bands developing on them. And then eventually those 4 spots turn into a whole mottled body where their whole body is covered with, you know, different spots and dots all over it, probably to help them camouflage better. And then the final stage is those spots start disappearing except for the ones around the middle, forming that nice solid black line that Pygmy Corydoras are known for. It's a really fast transformation because I would say within a month, basically, the juveniles looked exactly like miniature adults, and it was really hard to tell them apart. I fed mine a diet of, at first, live vinegar eels, as well as powdered fry food like Sarah Micron. And then as soon as they got big enough, I was just like pumping them full of live baby brine shrimp, which makes them grow really fast and healthy. So what is my final review? Well, pros, they're absolutely adorable. You know, they may not have the most color, but I love their big black eyes, their little whiskers that look like kind of a mustache. I like their behavior, the way they hover mid-water, flapping their wings, fins, like a hummingbird I mentioned before. And they even perch on plant leaves and branches like driftwood, just like birds do. So I love birds, by the way. And one of the cutest things I ever did was sleep on these little tufts of blackbeard algae on the driftwood, which was so cute. The cons are they're definitely a little bit harder to breed and raise the fry compared to albino Corydoras that I did before. And then also, like I mentioned before, they're pretty shy. You know, if I ever wanted to get some footage of them or look at them, basically, I'd have to sit there and be very, very still for a pretty long time. And then one of them would like cautiously dart out and he'd see me and like dart away. And so it took a lot of time to properly enjoy them. But do I think they're a must-have fish? Absolutely yes. Although I may have not gotten a ton of babies out of them, I think it was an absolutely fun breeding project just because it did take more patience and more hard work than usual. It wasn't that instant gratification. I felt like it made the success all the more sweeter. Plus, now that I've moved them all to the 20-gallon display tank, I still get to enjoy the fruits of my labor whenever I see them resting on a giant Anubias leaf or flitting around, kind of like little butterflies in a forest clearing. It's so cool. If you are looking for some really cool breeding projects, make sure to check out this playlist over here that I've made for you. Otherwise, take time to enjoy your aquariums, and I'll see you in the next video. Hi, I'm Irene with Girl Talks Fish. Okay.